how does a tiny fellowship of just 100 people explode into a global movement of millions? It's a pretty incredible story. Today, we're going to trace the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're going to do it by looking at the story they told about themselves, right in the forewords of their own book. All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start at the very beginning with that small fellowship of 100. Then we'll look at the single conversation that really sparked it all. After that, we'll dive into their chaotic growth and the smart principles that kept them from falling apart. We'll see them go global, and then finally, we'll get to the simple, powerful idea at the heart of it all that has never, ever changed. So let's jump back to 1939. This is the moment the fellowship decides, hey, we should probably put our message down in a book. But you have to realize, at the time, they were a surprisingly tiny group. I mean, just look at this. When the book Alcoholics Anonymous first hit the shelves, the entire movement was just 100 people. That's it. 100 men and women who felt they had found a new way to live. And their goal was incredibly simple and direct. They say it right there in that first foreword. The whole point of the book was to show other alcoholics exactly how they had recovered from what they called a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. But to really get where this book and this idea came from, we've got to rewind the clock just a little bit, a few years before the book was even a thought, to one crucial meeting back in 1935. The whole thing, everything that would eventually become Alcoholics Anonymous, really traces its roots back to a single conversation between two guys in Akron, Ohio. One was a stockbroker from New York, the other a local doctor. And what a pair, right? Two people from totally different worlds who stumbled upon the same solution. So you've got the stockbroker, a business deal goes south, and he's terrified he's about to drink again. And he has this flash of insight. To save himself, he has to find another alcoholic to help. And he does. He finds this doctor in Akron who tried everything to quit, including spiritual approaches, but nothing worked. But then, when the stockbroker explains alcoholism as this medical condition, this allergy, something just clicks for the doctor. And this was the big discovery, the powerful, game-changing idea that one alcoholic sharing their story could connect with another in a way that literally no one else could. Not a doctor, not a spouse, not a priest. This idea became the absolute bedrock of the entire program. Okay, so you have this really powerful idea. What happens next? Well, it just ignites this period of explosive, almost uncontrollable growth that nearly tore the whole thing apart before it even got started. Their first little taste of publicity came from an article in Liberty magazine. And all of a sudden, their tiny office in New York was just swamped with 800 desperate letters and calls. They were actually amazed that the message could be passed along just through the mail. But that was just a warm-up. In 1941, the Saturday Evening Post ran a big feature on them. This reached a massive audience, and that little rush of inquiries, it turned into an absolute national deluge. The secret was officially out. I mean, the growth rate was just unbelievable. Think about it. In 1939, they're just 100 people. 2 years later, after that article, they're at 8,000. And then by 1955, just 16 years after the book came out, they had ballooned to over 150,000 members. It's just staggering. So this amazing success creates this massive crisis, right? Here you have this unstructured society with no real leaders, no rules. How could it possibly survive its own success? Were they going to start fighting over money and power? Was the whole experiment just going to collapse under its own weight? Well, out of what they called a fearsome adolescent period, a set of guiding principles started to take shape. They called them the 12 traditions. And these weren't rules. They were more like suggestions for how to stay unified. Things like, leaders serve, they don't govern. There are no fees for membership. Each group runs itself. And crucially, they should always maintain personal anonymity with the media and stay out of public debates. This is the stuff that held them all together. So, after surviving its own success, the fellowship was ready for its next phase, transforming from a uniquely American institution into a truly global phenomenon. The scale of their reach is just wow. By 1976, they'd already crossed the 1 million member mark, and by 2001, that number had doubled again, over 2 million people in something like 150 different countries. And as it got bigger, it changed on the inside too. By the mid-70s, women made up more than a quarter of the membership, and young people, even some teenagers, were starting to find their way in. It was reaching way more people than the founders could have ever dreamed of. So, what was driving all this global growth? Well, a massive factor was the literature. That book, the one that started with just 100 people in mind, by 2001, it had been translated into 43 different languages. That's how this simple message was able to put down roots in so many different cultures.
But for all this incredible change in the number of people, in the technology, and who was showing up, the most remarkable thing really is what has stayed exactly the same.
Sure, the way people connect has changed completely. It went from word of mouth and mailed pamphlets to, well, now it's modem to modem, with people connecting in online meetings from all over the world. But the nature of that connection? It hasn't changed one single bit. Because at the end of the day, after all these years, after all these millions of people, the entire program, the entire global fellowship, still boils down to this one simple personal act. One alcoholic talking with another one. That's it. That's the engine that makes the whole thing run. Which kind of leaves us with this one big question to chew on, right? How does an idea that is so deeply personal, so dependent on a one-on-one human connection, how does that manage to scale across the entire planet through decades of massive change without ever losing its original, simple heart?